All right, today we're going to ask the question, is this the end of Power Pages as we know it? I don't think so. I think this is just another new tool to help us build websites. And this is a tool that I'm going to talk about today is the Claude Code plugin. And what it does, it provides a way for you to build a single page application Power Pages website, but using Claude Code, using Claude skills. Now, you saw my previous videos where I created a single page application. I used GitHub Copilot. I gave it a series of prompts. We sort of built up the site so we can understand the code, understand the structure. What Claude Skills does, essentially the same thing, but it has additional skills so we don't necessarily have to rely on our own prompts and instruction. It actually knows what to do in terms of creating a website, deploying the website, adding the permissions, adding the data structure, adding the authentication. So things that we had to actually do a little bit of extra prompting before, Claude Code now has these skills to do this for us. So basically, this is kind of the first time I'm doing this. I'm going to go running through the whole process of building a site. So I'm not going to start here on the Power Pages homepage. I'm basically going to go into Visual Studio Code for the web, Visual Studio Code desktop. And I'm just going to start brand new terminal. Now, in terms of installing, you'll need a Claude Code subscription. You'll need the Claude Code tools installed. You'll need the Power Platform tools installed, also the Azure CLI installed. So there's Microsoft documentation is good at outlining what you need and how to install all this. I think we're good. What I'm going to do is go to a working directory, and that's where we're going to build our website. Okay, so I've gone into my working directory here. I'm just going to type in Claude, and that's going to launch the terminal. The very first thing it's due for a safety check. It's going to make sure that this is a safe folder for me to work in. It's my own code. It's a local site. I'm all good. It's telling me that Claude Code is going to be able to read, edit, and execute files here. That's okay. So I'm just going to type yes. It's that human in the loop that's kicking in. All right, so now we have our Claude terminal up. So what we're going to want to do is install a couple of these skills from the Microsoft Marketplace. So first one is the Power Platform skills. We want to add that plugin into our Claude Code. So we do this. It's basically going through, it successfully added that marketplace. Now, the other thing that we want to do is add the Power Pages plugin on top of this. So basically, when get the command, and again, this command is in the documentation. However, in this particular case, for the actual plugin, I want to type in /global. So that's available to other projects, or else it's just going to be isolated to this particular project and you're going to get some error message. This is what I've noticed. So let's just hit this. And basically it's given me some details. It's asking me if I want to install for you, install for all collaborators in this repository, in this repo, or back to the plugin list. So basically I'm going to install for all collaborators, project scope. So let's do this. And there we go. It's installed. Now we have to restart Claude in order for these plugins to kick in. All right, so I've restarted the Claude terminal here, so we have this. So now what we should see is that we should begin to see our Power Pages skills show up here. So I'm seeing here, create site, add sample data, set up data model. Okay, so let's choose the create site. And now we need to give it some instructions. So a site description, it's optional. It will go through, the human in the loop may kind of pop back up again. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the prompt that I used to create our first single page application I did in a previous video to create the event sort of site that we created earlier. So I have this in my GitHub repository. I'm just going to copy this prompt. They are stored in Markdown files. You can take a look at that. That whole other event site that I created using GitHub Copilot before is all there. You can check that out as an example. Back here, I'm going to paste in that, and it's going to show as pasted text. I'm going to hit enter, and now it's kicking in. It's beginning to create this Power Pages single page application site. Now it's going to start going through and creating a series of tasks and begin to iterate. This isn't going to be instantaneous. This is going to take quite a while for it to go through and think about it. It is going to burn through a lot of tokens and credits. So again, this is where you're going to need the more of a paid subscription plan for Cloud Code in order for this to work. And even then, it is going to take a lot of resources. So when we get to a point where this is kind of production scenarios, we're probably going to be looking at a max or greater plan in order to do this on a daily basis. So anyways, it's looking at the site requirements. It's got that. So you see it's going through the checklist and keeping you informed of what's going on. Notice it is going through the tokens right now. It's already at 1.3K tokens. It keeps moving it up. It is creating the backup structure. It is going through creating those particular components of our single page application site, the scaffolding and everything along that, launching a dev server. So it's interesting to kind of watch. It's almost like you're sort of supervising, looking over the shoulder of a developer as they're doing this. So it's also good from a learning perspective just to see what it's doing, seeing all these components come together. It's kind of fascinating in a sense, a little bit worrisome because this is someone's job sometimes. But if you look at it the other way, think of this sometimes is kind of tedious work. It's definitely important. But now if we can get Cloud Code to do some of this for us, it's going to allow us to kind of focus more on the creative aspects of creating a Power Pages website. All right, so the interesting thing here is we actually see our local host. This is our local server running, and we're seeing this building dynamics page, dynamics event. So this is the default page that comes up as it's beginning to build out the infrastructure. So kind of think of that sample page when we created React before, or Vite. It's going through and it's telling me it's building the pages, and it's running locally on my machine. So that's pretty awesome as well. Meanwhile, as this is going on, if I just minimize this window, we do see that Claude is still working through, and the human in the loop has now kicked in. It's saying, does this plan look good? Look at the implementation plan. It's basically going through. Let's just scroll back up here a little bit. Here's the implementation plan. The different phases it's going to run. So it kind of gives you that discussion or that conversation back and forth about the color scheme. That was part of my prompt. The different pages it's going to create, the shared components it's going to create, some of the design elements. It talks about the fonts. If you're not a big fan of these fonts, you can go and change that, of course, if you want to change it to Comic Sans, like I know some people are big fans of. We go through the whole implementation plan, the different color schemes. So really kind of a product requirements document that I've talked about in other videos that should be created before we build anything. Goes through all of this stuff. If we think the plan looks good, great, we can approve and start building, or we can make some changes. We can begin to adjust that. So again, this is sort of the iteration approach, very much like things like Plan Designer or Generative Pages, where we're not necessarily doing the coding, but we're having that conversation as the site's being built. I think it looks good. I'm just going to select one and approve the implementation plan. So I've got my sign off here, and now Cloud Code is just going to go back and begin to build this and begin to implement everything. So we're just going to let this run. Meanwhile, the other local host is up and running. We see this chugging away. So it's kind of letting us know what's going on. But it's also interesting to see what's happening on the Cloud Code side. All right, we have another human in the loops come. Basically, it's asking me if it's want to use some photos from Unsplash. If you don't know what Unsplash is, it's a kind of an open source place for photos and stuff for our particular website that we're building. That's pretty cool. It's interesting that it didn't go to, for the Office stock images that we have regular access in Power Pages. Still, that's good. I'm just going to hit yes here. And it's just going to keep on going that. And we do see that there is a checkpoint coming up where it's going to review with the user to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So again, it's not operating in its own little black box. What's cool about this, it is having these conversations back. So we are still building this site together, but it is doing its own thing. Now, one thing I've not tried yet that I'm very curious to try, this is maybe for a future video, is the remote access. I don't know if you've seen this, but you can get this terminal running on your own cell phone or your own mobile phone, and you can interact with that. So while Cloud Code is working on my desktop computer, I can kind of manage this human in the loop process from my phone. So I can go to the gym, I can go for a walk as this is, building out the site. So we see here that the site it's building, that local host, keeps refreshing, keeps popping up every so often, and we're going to see that this is going to begin to evolve to look like our site that we're building. All right, we're actually seeing on our local host, interesting, our site being built is actually now beginning to show up. We are beginning to see what our page looks like on our sessions page. We can begin to navigate this. We see our home page. We see the About Us. We see that some of those stock images coming from Unsplash, which is pretty cool. It is following our branding style about the red and black and white, the fonts that were chosen, that type of thing. It is filling in some of this information, of course. And if I look here, it looks like Claude is now asking me for a question. It's telling me here the sites for review on their local host. Check it on the browser. You'd like to make changes. So here we can go in and make changes. So no, we don't like the font color. No, we don't like the images. Here's where we can have that conversation, begin to change things around a little bit. For me, just to keep on going, I'm just going to say, yeah, it looks great. No changes needed. Again, what we probably also should do is begin to take a look at the code that's being created behind here as well. And we can definitely review that at the end. At this point, it's going through some of the deployment. And basically now, so this is the interesting thing. This is something that we had to use manually with the Power Platform CLI before. It's asking us, would you like to deploy your site to Power Pages now? And I've already signed in with my local auth, so I am connected to a Power Platform environment with the CLI. I didn't really go through those steps, and I didn't mention that earlier, but I did want to mention that yes, I am signed in through my auth, and I have configured directly to an environment. Again, dev sandbox environment. Do not do this in prod. Anyways, so yeah, I can deploy or I can skip. So yeah, let's just hit deploy now. And what this is going to do, this is going to kick off the Power Platform CLI, and it's going to ask me if it's going to allow me to use the skills. So this is another skill that it's using, deploy site, and kind of the things that we know how to do manually, but it's kind of cool that this wants to do it. It even gives me sort of the command here, but yeah, we definitely want to proceed with that. Well, sure, Claude, if you want to do it, go for it. So what it's doing now, it's basically going through and it's deploying and it's verifying I have the Pack CLI installed, verifying my authentication, confirming the target environment. The other thing too that's interesting, it's handling block JavaScript. So if you know in Dataverse that it doesn't allow JavaScript files, this will fix that too. That will adjust the settings in your Power Platform Dataverse environment to allow the temporary uploading of JavaScript files, which is pretty interesting. It's verified that I've authenticated the environment I'm going through. And basically it's again confirming with me, making sure I'm not accidentally connecting to my production environment or another environment. So yeah, confirming that, which is really good. I really appreciate that. So yes, I'm good. And now it's going to continue to deploy and wrap up. And then we're going to be able to view that site in our Power Pages site in a few minutes. All right, we actually see our site's been deployed, and now it's going to say, would you like to activate or provision the site to get its live URL? What does that mean? Let's just kind of check in here. I'm going to go into my Power Pages homepage here, and we don't see any active sites. However, if I click on the inactive sites, we do see that Dynamics event site that got created today is there. That was from another experiment a little bit earlier on. So basically what we're saying is when we're telling Power Pages to provision the site is move it from that inactive state to the active state. So this is very much like if I deployed this portal through a solution, if we uploaded a single page application, as you saw in my last video, it does show up in the active sites. So either, yes, I could click reactivate it here, but again, if Cloud Code's going to do this for me, let's actually get it to activate. And again, it's asking me if now again, I could flip to don't ask me for permission, just keep doing what it's doing. But I kind of like this human in the loop. I like kind of keeping an eye on things. As I kind of begin to build a little bit of trust with this, maybe we can kind of move on. But for now, yeah, check in with me as we're going through this. Let's make this a collaborative process. Okay, eventually we're going to see the site subdomain will be this. It's asking me if I want to add my own subdomain. Let's do that. Let's actually, so it's telling me other below. So yeah, I'm going to type something. So I'm just going to call this, let's just call this Dyn Events 2026, just for something here that should be unique. It will double check that. So again, this is where we don't just have to keep accepting everything. We can begin to interject and kind of make some changes along the way or provide our own information. So it's basically telling me yes to activate it. It's giving me all the information, the environment ID, the subdomain, the name of the site, and the URL. I click, this is I'm accepting, moving on. And now it's deploying and wrapping it up. And making sure it's going to be done. Now, I've noticed that this does take a little bit of time to actually do the site activation, but that's okay. So let's just let that run. So after a few minutes, we're actually seeing the final project summary. We're not done yet, but it created the site. It created around the framework, the different technologies. It used the actual location on our local machine. That's good to have. Our live URL, basically giving us what was built, 3 pages, the About Us, the Hero, the sessions with the event cards. So we can actually begin to take a look at all of this stuff. So it gives us the breakdown of our code as well. So this is good stuff that we could take, put into a wiki or somewhere else in terms of the documentation or a markdown file as part of the GitHub repository, telling me some optional next steps. We'll get there in a minute. If we take a look at the site itself, this is on the local host. So again, we see all this, we see the About Us, we see the sessions. This is all, at this point, test sample data. It's not tied to Dataverse yet. We're going to get there, but it is kind of giving us a bit of an overview. So that's what it looks like locally. I'm very curious to see what it looks like on our Power Pages site. So now here, if I'm on my Power Pages homepage, we do see the Dynamics events here. I still think this is in the process of provisioning. Let me just double check Claude Code. Tells me one background task is still running. So that's probably what it's doing. So maybe we can double check. Let's actually go and see. I'm just going to hit the preview button here. Again, desktop, mobile, same as you would any other Power Pages site. So the cool thing here, it's within the context of Power Pages. So things like all our security, our web application firewall, our content delivery networks, of course, the web roles, the Dataverse permissions, all of that other stuff. Of course, we're going to need to give it permissions. All right, our Power Pages site has come up. This is now running within the context of Power Pages. Basically, now I have that the site is private, which is probably a good thing. But overall, we see here, I have the About Us, the sessions, again, not yet tied to Dataverse, but basically the site that we saw locally, we're now having hosted in Power Pages. I really didn't do any coding, didn't really do too much. I just kind of launched the process, gave it a prompt, and it's come up with this. So that's pretty amazing. But now let's actually take it to the next step. Let's actually begin to tie in Dataverse into this whole process. So I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Desktop. And basically here, it's giving us our optional next steps. But what we're going to want to do is set up a data model. So I'm going to type set up data model. And I'm going to want to give it a bit of a description here. So I'm going to say, all right, so here I have created the setup data model. I've given it some context. I want the contact table for speakers. That's the out of the box one. I want to create a new table for sessions. I've given it some instructions on the lookup. Talk about the primary name field, some other fields that we'd want, start and date time. Told it to build an option set, a panel for different things, and also a registration table to collect some information there. So we're going to kick this off. And now this is going to create the process to create our data model within the Claude Code terminal. So this is different than the Dataverse tool that you have in Power Apps. Now you can use this as well, from what I understand, to build out your data model depending on what you want to do. This is pretty interesting that we have this already built into the system. It is using the PAX CLI where we can begin to build our Dataverse model this way. So again, very much like all things in the Power Platform, there are 10 different ways to do the exact same thing. So we're going to let this kind of run through a little bit as it's going through that. It is finding some issues. Here's the neat thing about this. There were some issues. It couldn't find some commands. So what it's beginning to do, it's actually going through and writing some scripts. It's trying to fix itself or self-heal along the way. This is kind of interesting, again, a little bit scary as well about what this is doing, but it's also kind of cool that our whole process isn't being derailed because of a broken command or something. Because this is more non-deterministic, it kind of can go through and fix itself, which is pretty interesting. That's more of a commentary than really about this particular tool. But here, again, giving us a bit of a checklist, and it's also going to here, the review and approve proposal means that, again, humans going to be brought back in the loop. We're going to make sure everything's on the right track as we're beginning to build out this data model for our website. So here it's saying, does this data model look correct? So we can begin to see here it's broken out the different table names. It's not solution aware yet. That is a problem. That's feedback that's been given to Microsoft. That's unfortunate. I know that will come. It's telling me it's reusing the contact table. That's pretty cool. Plan Designer couldn't do that on day one. I would like it to use the solution, the proper prefix. We'll live with it for now. It's giving us basically the names, the column names for the registration table. It's telling us the relationships it want to build. It's coming up with an ER diagram. This is neat. This is using mermaid format, so we could cut and paste and create a diagram of that if we really wanted to. I'm going to approve, yes, or again, we could go through and begin to iterate on this and change things around. For now, I'm just going to approve and create those tables. And it's going through. What's interesting here is it's actually using, and again, notice it's already up to 92% of my session limit, and it will reset at noon today. So again, we might not be able to get through the whole creation of the site. And I started this morning with a fresh set. So again, this is burning up a lot of capacity with Claude. Very interesting, like again, exercise here, but again, it does use a lot of resources. So just, again, be aware of that. So we're already up to 93%. We're going to see this particular eke up. It is creating two different tables with some fields. So it's not even creating all that complex of a data model. So very interesting. We'll see how far we get. All right, so it's created the tables. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, now that it's created those tables, that's pretty cool. Let's double check that exists. All right, so now I'm into my Power Apps. I just went to look at the tables, and yes, we do see the session registration tables got created there. Kind of amazingly, well, not really amazingly, but into the environment using that Claude Code plugin. So that's pretty amazing. So that's done. Now, if we continue on back here into our terminal, we have the next step is add sample data. So I'm going to do that, and that's probably going to burn through the rest of my allocation until probably around noon today, where I'm going to have to kick off the process. So I'm going to choose add sample data. And basically it's thinking about it. Now, again, I could give it some context, like saying use kind of Power Pages or Power Platform type sample data, or use Simpsons characters as the names or something like that. For now, I'm just basically just kind of gave it sort of free reign a little bit. It's going to be a little creative. It might burn a few more of its brain cells trying to do this. So it's kind of looking at the prerequisites. It's discovering the tables. I'm already at 98%. So chances are I'm going to be running out of space pretty soon. We are seeing how this is incrementing. It's selecting the tables. It's burning through tokens, but it is doing a lot of work. So, you know, like even if you hired somebody, you'd have to pay them and feed them too, probably. So anyways, it's asking me what tables I want to populate, the session and contact registration only. Let's just do session and contact. Let's not worry about the registration. We can add that later. So I'm just going to do that. 5 records, 10, 25. Again, it's telling me how many, or I could even put in my own value here. Let's just do 5 records. Let's keep this simple, submit answers, and it's going to go through and create some sample data for us. All right, so we've kind of got the 100% limit here. So just keep this as it's looking tight. It's inserting records. It tells me hit the limit. Basically, it's going to ask me again, do I stop and wait for the limit reset? Do I switch to extra usage? Do I upgrade the plan? basically for now, I don't want to switch to extra usage, just kind of burn through money at this point. I don't want to upgrade my plan just yet. I probably will have to soon. So what I'm going to do is just sort of stop and wait for the limit to reset. I'm going to enter to confirm this. And then basically what I could probably do later around noon is come back and continue on with this process. So let's just, before we move on to that, let's just scroll up. We can take a look at the sample data that it got created. It created 5 sessions. It created 5 example names. I'm not sure where it pulled that out from, if these are real people or not. I hope not. Anyways, so we have here the data, and so we've already we've burned through a lot of our sort of our allocation, kind of on a time allocation. But basically what we've done is we've created a site, we've deployed it, we've designed it, we've created Dataverse tables, we've created sample data, and now what we're going to have to do is wait to do the next part. So the next part's what we're going to do is upload the sample data, but then rewire that back into our Power Pages site so we can interact with that, and then also set up security and also set up authentication. So stay tuned for that. All right, so now we've gone through, ready for a reset cycle in terms of our tokens. So basically I'm back in Cloud Code here in the terminal. I'm just going to say, basically, please continue being polite to the machine, and see if that's going to continue on the process. So it is looking like it is going through that whole process of inserting the records. So basically, it's asking me if I want to bypass the policy about uploading data, so requiring approval. So again, human in the loop. I probably said that 100 times already, but this is the cool thing about this is, like I said, not running in a black box. It is going off. It is verifying each step of the way so we know what's going on. So we see here it is inserting the contact records, and it'll be inserting the, it said it's all done, verifying everything. And it looks like it created some records in here. Okay, we're all good there. We don't need to verify the counts. They're 5 records each, so we're probably all right. All right, here we had a few little hiccups here, but all good. Do you want to verify the counts? Let's do yes. So basically, it's just going to verify the counts of that data. Again, we're doing 5 records, so that's not really that big of a deal. It's going to want some permission. Yep. It's going to verify on this PowerShell. So it is doing a bit of PowerShell work here, which is all good. So what we can see here is this plugin is using a variety of tools. Of course, the pack CLI, and also some PowerShell to be able to run some of those pack CLI commands that, of course, is running the APIs in the connection here. So, yep, it found everything. Asked me if I want to proceed with these commands. In terms of our sample data, looks good. So notice here it is about updating the skill tracking, the authoring tool. So again, it's adding sample data to the skill usage. So again, this is part of its learning and that kind of thing, which is pretty cool in the tool. So the next time we run this, I'm guessing this might make things easier. I'm not sure. So anyways, we can always take a look at that to see what was changed later on. All right, so it's gone through, it's verified. If we take a look at here, it's basically took a look, it created those records, it created the speakers, it created the sessions and also link to a particular speaker as well. Now it's giving me the next steps, the Power Pages integrate web API. So now what we want to do is wire these tools to the sessions page, and basically it's already understanding about the sessions and the registrations. And then basically redeploy with all these latest things. So let's do this. Let's just type in the integrate web API. So we see that here. Again, we could give it some further instructions. I'm just going to leave this as is and just curious to see what happens if it recognizes our web pages to the tables that we created. All right, so it's gone through and it's found tables that need the Web API integration session. So we already have the mock data there in our site. Now registrations, we don't have no UI yet. That's something I think we can do later in the contact, the speaker lookup for sessions. Also no UI yet. So for now, even though it says to recommend all of them, I'm going to do session only because really I just want to display the session with the Web API calls. So that will do that first. So I'm just going to hit 2. And then, yeah, basically Claude came back and said, I'll integrate the session table only. And then we can go back later and do like a registration page. At this point, we don't have a UI for it. We just had the session listing, and that's all good. All right, so it's gone through now. It's created, we assume it's created the Web API permissions, or sorry, the Web API connections. We can take a look at that. We can see that it's created some TypeScript, verifying the integrations, going through all this stuff. So we could review all these settings that the Claude Code has done. All good there. And then in terms of permissions, of course, you know, Web API permissions, we need to make sure we set those up in Dataverse to allow people to be able to read and write and do that kind of thing. So basically it's, we'll also do this for us as well. So we can actually upload a permission diagram, we can describe it, or we can analyze our site's web roles and propose these permissions automatically, or we can type something. I'm going to actually, let's chat about this. Let's make sure that we have at least read access. All authenticated users would have read access to the sessions. So I'm just going to do 4, and I'm going to say this one, and it's going to ask me how would I clarify. So I'm basically going to say, I can say just let the permission architect figure it out. No, I'm basically going to say, so basically I've typed in, set it up that the authenticated users, which is an out of the box security role, have the ability to read all the session data on the portal. So let's see if it figures this out. So it says it's got it. Authenticated users get read access to all session data. Let me invoke the permissions agent with that context. And again, we've hit our session, we've hit our limit of conversation with Claude. So yeah, we've kind of hit another roadblock along the way. So it's very interesting that we can only get so far using the Pro plan. So I think in order for this to be effective, we're going to have to consider, you know, increasing the amount of tokens and stuff for this to work effectively. Or the other option is to use the GitHub Copilot and use it where you can adjust the model depending on what you're doing. So anyways, we're going to probably sit and wait this one out for a while. But again, what we've done is we've uploaded the sample data. It's created the Dataverse, the Web API, which is pretty handy because that could be somewhat complicated. And now we're just going through those Web API permissions. So we still need to set up authentication and a few other things. And yeah, and we'll catch up when we catch up. All right, so we've added more credits to Claude and basically asked it to continue where we left off. So basically we were setting up the Web API permissions specifically. And remember, we gave the prompt for the authenticated users. So that's what it's kicking off and doing now. So we'll let that run. So as it goes through the process, it keeps asking me questions about accessing different skills. Now it's asking me for the agent skills. It's going through setting up the site settings and the Web API permissions as we expected. So again, we can let it continue and do its own thing, but basically by stopping each step of the way, we are making sure it's doing the right thing. It's kind of not going rogue on us at this point. So here we're actually at a point where we're adding something to the table permissions, YAML file. So if you've worked with the Power Pages metadata code in the Visual Studio for desktop, you probably are familiar with some of the YAML files that set up the configuration. So basically it's just doing that in the YAML files, which will be uploaded into the Power Pages site. So it's kind of a clever way to build these files and things, as opposed to going through the Dataverse API and trying to do that directly. So basically just going through, it's adding site settings. So as you recall before in the last video, I had to go into the Power Pages management app, set up those site settings manually. This is actually going through that whole process, doing it locally by creating those YAML files that will be part of the uploading. So it looks like that's pretty much done. Just kind of finalizing a few things. And the cool thing is we've pretty much done everything from this Claude terminal interface. We've verified the site by looking at it, but overall, everything we've done, we're doing within here. We're not jumping to the Power Pages management app. We're not jumping to the Power Pages homepage. So it's pretty neat that we can actually do everything from one spot. So it's set up the web API integration. The permissions are ready to make everything live, meaning tied directly to Dataverse. The site needs to be redeployed. Do you want to deploy now? Yeah, let's deploy that. So it's basically going to go through that whole process of taking the metadata that's stored locally on your desktop and uploading that to the site. And again, it's reading that. It's understanding by reading the skills files. So as it's doing this, this might be a place where some token efficiencies could be kicked in. It is using the Claude models here, burning through tokens to upload the site. This is something I could have just gone to a command line and run pretty automatically. So again, as we begin to, yes, these tools are cool, but sometimes it's a case of digging carrots with a backhoe. We're using a lot of AI tokens to do very simple things, where that we could probably do them ourselves pretty efficiently as well. Again, that's just my opinion on things, but we see here, I'm just letting it do its thing now. But it is something to consider as we kind of move forward with this technology. All right, so it's gone through. It's given me some summary as well. It's redeployed, so here's some post-deployment notes. It kind of gave a summary of everything it did. Again, this is really cool, so we know what it did and where. Now, again, it's giving me some post-deployment notes, so it's actually telling me what to test, which is pretty cool, about testing the API, checking the permissions. Users must be logged in to access the data via the web API. So here's the rub. We've set this up for authenticated users, but I kind of put myself into a bit of a little bit of a lobster trap here. I can't authenticate to this site because I've not set up authentication yet. I've set up the permissions that only authenticated users can view the data. So what I'm going to have to do is configure the authentication in order to be able to sign into this site. So let's go do that. All right, so basically here I'm going to type up setup auth. And again, I could give it some extra information, but for now, it's going through, it's checking the auth prerequisites, planning the auth implementation, creating the auth service. This will be interesting because this is something typically we've always had to go in to set up our authentication provider in Azure before we could do anything in Power Pages, whether that's enter external authentication, the old Azure business to consumer, or Okta or one of the other third-party ones. I'm curious to see what Claude's going to do, how it's going to handle this. It's asking me what authentication features I need, login, logout, role-based access control. Yep, that makes full auth setup, sign in, sign out via Entra ID, plus role-based UI visibility for authenticated users and administrators. So this is interesting. It's doing Entra, but not Entra external ID. So this would probably be extra steps. I'm going to stick with the Entra ID now for purposes of this. And so basically this might be one area where we probably need to get more involved with in the future. All right, so like the other steps, it's given me an implementation plan. If I want to make any changes to that, we can take a look at the plan itself. Basically creating the auth service and the utilities. I'm just going to approve and proceed. And we're going to let it do its thing. Okay, so this is really cool. It's going to want to go through and verify the auth setup. So how is it going to do that? I'm kind of curious. It actually wants to use the Playwright. There's a Playwright plugin to navigate to the URL, which is the local host, and it's going to verify the authentication there. Of course, it's asking me for permission. It's going to use the tool. It's asking me for permission to use Playwright. Absolutely, this is really neat. I think for testing and that kind of thing. So let's just see what happens. It launched the page. We do see there is a sign out button. It's signed in as dev user. So yeah, that's kind of neat. So if we actually look here, again, do we want to proceed? We said yes. So it's verifying that. I don't know if I'll be able to see this or not, or if it's just doing something in the background. Yeah. So it's gone through. I'm not sure what Playwright did there. It was interesting. I did see it did launch the site. I see here in my local version, I do have a dev user. If I try to sign out, it doesn't really do anything. And basically I see an anti-forgery token. So that's interesting. Looking at Claude now, it's telling me I need to deploy that again. So that's all good. Remember, we deployed it with the authenticated users, so we couldn't really test that. So I'm going to basically redeploy now. Burning a few tokens, which is kind of weird because normally we would just deploy and not thinking anything of it. But now it's kind of like, driving to the next city and conserving gas, or if you're driving an electric car, kind of preserving electricity along the way. So we'll sort of see how this goes and see how this deploys, and hopefully it works. All right, so it's redeployed, giving me some post-deploy notes. I noticed this was significantly faster. Testing the deployed site, it only works on deployed Power Pages site, fair enough, not on the local host. Telling me to go in, sign in to test it. The site's identity provider must be configured in the Power Pages admin center to use Microsoft Entra ID. So that's interesting. This is, again, we're going to need to set this up manually. So as much as Claude Code can do a few amazing things, setting up the back end, those external authentication providers is not one of them. Assign web roles. Users must be assigned the authenticated user's web role and Power Pages admin to access the session data. This is something that kind of Claude gets wrong. Authenticated users by default are available to all users because it has that little yes, all authenticated users tag, which everybody gets confused with. So that's very interesting. So we don't need to add our users to authenticated users. And then basically it says unauthenticated visitors will see a sign in to view sessions prompt. And basically local development, the auth service uses a mock user. So you can test role-based UI without deploying, but it's accessing the data. So now let's take a look to see what actually our site looks like. So I'm here on the Power Pages homepage. I'm going to hit preview again. Now, for those of you, as a reminder, preview gives you a clear cache kind of capabilities. I believe also for single page applications, there's still caching involved. Of course, if you want to skip the cache for data, there is ways using server logic. That was my last video that I did. You can check that out. Server logic is something that you can use in single page applications as well, or code apps for Power Pages, depending on what you want to call it. All right, so after a little bit of findangling, there was a few little things. We have the site here, the welcome to dynamic site. If I go to sessions, it's telling me I need to sign in to view the session. So that aligns with the fact that we wanted only authenticated users to see the sessions. I'm just going to hit the sign in button up here. So here I've signed in. It's picked up Entra ID automatically. And now it's loading the sessions. Let's see if it comes up. It says you do not have permission to view the sessions. Please contact your system administrator. So I find that interesting. So we'll probably have to dive in and take a little bit of a look there. If I look at the security workspace in our Power Pages home or site here, let's look at web roles. We have anonymous users. That's cool. I look at table permissions. We have global access to authenticated users. So that makes me think that something in terms of wiring it up didn't work correctly. All right, I think I found the issue. If I take a look at the table permissions, it's asking me if I want to have any save changes. I'm taking a look here. It put the schema name in the name, but it didn't actually select the table. So that's interesting. So I'm going to have to specify that session. Okay, I've defined that. I've hit save now, still authenticated users. So we've updated this. I'm now just going to hit the preview. And now if I go explore our sessions, it's interesting. I'm getting attribute. So I'm a little bit closer. Session ID in table is not enabled for Web API. Again, I can go back to Claude, give it this and get it to fix it so I know exactly what this is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this manually. I'm going to go into the Power Pages Management app. I'm going to go into the site settings because this is a Web API issue. And I'm just doing this for sake of time because, and also not burning credits. So here are the session fields. I'm going to go this and I'm going to make sure I add this particular field to the Web API. I get why it didn't put it there. A couple things here. So good, good that we're learning together on this. So I've updated this. I'm now going to go back to my Power Pages Management app. We're going to hit the sync button. The sync button will basically make sure all those changes made to the Dataverse metadata will be synced back up to our Power Pages site. So we're good here. Now let's hit preview, which of course will clear the cache. Let this refresh the site. That was pretty quick, actually, a little bit too quick. Let's hit sessions, and there we go. All right, so just a few little things here. So I'm actually seeing the breakout sessions, the Dataverse information. We do have the authentication turned on, so I can do a sign out, and we'll see if that signs me out properly. Yeah, it looked like it did. And if I look at the sessions, it's given me a view to sign in. Very cool. All right, so just to recap everything that we did today, we basically installed the Claude Code plugin for the Power Pages, which loaded the skills. We went through, we created a brand new site, we provisioned the site, we activated it, we added design, we added pages, we added styling, it went through, then we actually had some mock data, we created a data model. We uploaded this, we created the Web API, which basically took that data model and wired that in. And we also turned on authentication with Entra ID, which is kind of configured by default. So a lot of extra work still to be done. If I wanted to use Entra external ID, I need to configure that and then wire that in. It did burn through a lot of Claude tokens and credits. I kept running out until I upgraded the plan. So that is something to be aware of. It'd be interesting to see what the GitHub Copilot version of doing this is. But overall, this goes back to the original question, is this the end of Power Pages as we know it, going through and configuring? So I still think there's a lot of traction there. There's a lot of good use. We can configure and build using those drag and drop, those point and click tools, creating web templates, web pages, web forms, entity forms, all of that fun stuff. But this is a new and interesting way to create a website. Being able to have a lot of that flexibility, but we do see that it does take a lot of computing power from AI. Again, we still have to do a lot of pre-planning, which is not a bad thing. And it's pretty interesting all put together. So this is still in preview. It'll be very interesting to see how this lands. We noticed a couple things around the whole web session setup, web permission setup, which we were able to solve again because we know Power Pages inside and out. If we didn't, I could see a regular user begin to struggle with this, and you see that Claude is kind of going down the code hole. We didn't really tell it to take a look at the web permissions. It was an obvious thing, but overall, pretty neat stuff. Just very curious to see what your thoughts are.